The emergency room buzzed with its usual chaos when Marcus Rodriguez wheeled in another patient from the ambulance bay. After 12 years as a Navy corpsman and now 3 years working civilian emergency medicine, he thought he had seen everything. The overnight shift at Memorial Hospital had been particularly brutal. 2 car accidents, a heart attack, and a domestic violence case that left him questioning humanity once again. Marcus pushed the gurney toward Trauma Bay 3, his trained eyes already assessing the unconscious woman strapped to the backboard. Mid-20s, blonde hair matted with blood, multiple lacerations across her face and arms. The paramedics had briefed him quickly. Single vehicle accident on Highway 101, car wrapped around a telephone pole, driver trapped for nearly an hour before extraction. As he began transferring her to the examination table, something caught his eye that made his hands freeze mid-motion. There, barely visible beneath the torn fabric of her jacket, was an emblem he recognized immediately. The distinctive anchor, eagle, and globe of the United States Marine Corps, sewn onto what appeared to be a dress blue uniform underneath her civilian clothes. His breath caught in his throat. The memories came flooding back without warning. The dusty streets of Fallujah, the sound of incoming mortars, and most vividly, the face of Lance Corporal Sarah Chen as she bled out in his arms despite everything he tried to do to save her. The same emblem had been on her uniform that day, and he had failed her completely. Dr. Patterson's voice snapped him back to reality. "Rodriguez, we need to move now. Her vitals are dropping." Marcus forced himself to focus, pushing down the panic that threatened to overwhelm him. This was just another patient, he told himself. Just another person who needed help. But as he began cutting away her clothing to assess her injuries, he noticed something else that made his stomach drop. Pinned to the inside of her jacket was a small unit citation ribbon he recognized from his own time in Iraq. She had been there too, in that hellish place where he had lost too many good people and where his confidence as a medic had been shattered forever. The woman stirred slightly, her eyes fluttering open for just a moment. In that brief instant, Marcus saw something familiar, not her face, but the look in her eyes. It was the same determined expression he remembered from the Marines he had served alongside. The quiet strength that carried them through impossible situations. His hands began to shake as he reached for the IV supplies. This shouldn't be happening. He was a professional, trained to handle any medical emergency with calm precision. But something about this patient, about that emblem, transported him back to a place he had spent years trying to forget. The attending physician was calling out orders, but Marcus found himself moving in slow motion, his usual quick reflexes hampered by the flood of memories. He kept seeing Sarah's face instead of the patient in front of him, kept hearing the explosions and screams that had haunted his dreams for years. "Rodriguez, I need that IV now," Dr. Patterson said sharply, noticing his hesitation. Marcus nodded and forced his hand steady, but inside he was falling apart. He had thought he was past this, thought the therapy and medication had helped him move beyond the trauma. But apparently some wounds never truly healed. As he worked to stabilize the patient, Marcus found himself wondering about her story. What had brought her to this small coastal town? Was she active duty or, like him, trying to build a new life after service? The questions multiplied in his mind, but he pushed them aside and focused on doing his job. The next hour passed in a blur of medical procedures and tests. The woman remained unconscious but stable, and gradually Marcus felt his training take over. He could do this. He had to do this. Whatever demons this case stirred up, he couldn't let them interfere with saving someone's life. But as he finally stepped back from the trauma bay, Marcus knew that something fundamental had shifted. The carefully constructed wall he had built between his past and present had just developed a serious crack, and he wasn't sure how long it would hold. 3 days later, Marcus found himself walking past the intensive care unit more often than necessary. The patient from the car accident had been identified as Staff Sergeant Emma Walsh, currently on medical leave from Camp Pendleton. Her condition had stabilized, though she remained unconscious with what doctors called a complex traumatic brain injury. Marcus knew he should stay away. His job was in the emergency department, and he had no reason to be checking on patients once they moved upstairs. But something about Emma Walsh pulled at him in a way he couldn't explain or ignore. During his lunch break, he finally gave in to the impulse and quietly entered her room. She lay perfectly still, connected to various monitors that beeped softly in the sterile silence. Someone had combed her hair and cleaned the blood from her face, revealing features that seemed both strong and vulnerable. Her medical chart hung at the foot of the bed, and Marcus found himself reading it despite knowing it was against protocol. 26 years old, originally from Denver, Colorado. 2 tours in Afghanistan, specializing in explosive ordnance disposal. The notation made Marcus's respect for her increase immediately. EOD specialists had some of the most dangerous jobs in the military, requiring nerves of steel and unwavering focus. No wonder she had that determined look in her eyes. The chart also revealed something that made his chest tighten. She had no emergency contacts listed except for a military chaplain at Camp Pendleton. No family, no friends, no one who cared enough to sit beside her bed during what might be her final days. Marcus understood that loneliness all too well. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. A middle-aged nurse named Patricia entered, someone Marcus had worked with many times during his tenure at the hospital. She smiled when she saw him but didn't seem surprised by his presence. "I heard you were the one who brought her in," Patricia said quietly, checking Emma's IV lines with practiced efficiency. "Dr. Patterson mentioned you seemed pretty shaken up about it." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "Just a rough case, that's all." Patricia's knowing look suggested she wasn't buying his explanation. She had been working in hospitals for over 20 years and had seen plenty of medical professionals struggle with difficult cases. But there was something different about Marcus's interest in this particular patient. "She's been having some rough nights," Patricia continued, making notes on Emma's chart. "Nightmares even while unconscious. Yesterday she was speaking in her sleep, calling out warnings about IEDs. Poor thing is still fighting a war in her mind." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He knew exactly what those nightmares were like, had experienced them himself for years after returning from Iraq. The constant replay of traumatic events, the feeling of helplessness, the guilt over surviving when others didn't. Emma was trapped in the same hell that had consumed him for so long. "Has anyone come to visit her?" Marcus asked, though he already suspected the answer. Patricia shook her head sadly. "No one. Her unit chaplain called to check on her condition, but he's stationed too far away to visit. It's heartbreaking, really. Everyone should have someone who cares about them, especially during times like this." After Patricia left, Marcus remained in the room, studying Emma's peaceful face and wondering about the battle she was fighting behind closed eyelids. He found himself talking to her, even though she couldn't hear him, sharing stories about his own experiences overseas and the long road to recovery that had brought him to this hospital. "I know what it's like," he said quietly, pulling a chair closer to her bed. "The dreams, the guilt, the feeling like you don't belong anywhere anymore. I won't pretend it gets easy, but it does get manageable if you have the right help and support." As if responding to his voice, Emma's heart rate monitor showed a slight change in rhythm. Her eyelids fluttered briefly, and for a moment Marcus thought she might wake up. But then she settled back into the deep unconsciousness that had claimed her since the accident. Walking back to the emergency department, Marcus made a decision that surprised him. He would check on Emma Walsh every day until she either recovered or he pushed that darker possibility from his mind. She reminded him too much of himself and of all the service members he had known who faced their battles alone. But more than that, something about her case felt like unfinished business from his past. Maybe this was his chance to save someone he couldn't save before, to prove to himself that his skills as a medic still mattered. Or maybe he was just a lonely veteran who recognized a kindred spirit in need of help. Either way, Marcus knew his involvement with Emma Walsh was just beginning, and he had no idea where it would lead him. On Friday evening, exactly 1 week after the accident, Marcus was reviewing patient charts when Patricia burst through the emergency department doors with news that made his heart race. Emma Walsh had finally regained consciousness, and she was asking questions that nobody could answer. Marcus dropped everything and rushed to the ICU, taking the stairs 2 at a time rather than waiting for the elevator. When he reached Emma's room, he found her sitting up in bed looking confused and agitated. Her eyes were alert but unfocused, and she kept touching her head where a large bandage covered her surgical site. "Where am I?" She was asking Dr. Martinez, the neurologist assigned to her case. "What happened to my unit? Are my Marines safe?" Dr. Martinez patiently explained that she was in a civilian hospital in California, that she had been in a car accident, and that her military unit was fine. But Emma's brain injury was causing significant short-term memory problems, and she seemed unable to retain the information for more than a few minutes at a time. Marcus lingered in the doorway, unsure whether he should enter. This was the first time he had seen Emma awake, and something about her demeanor reminded him powerfully of himself during his own recovery from combat trauma. She had that same lost, desperate look that he remembered from his darkest days. "I need to get back to my team," Emma was saying, trying to swing her legs out of bed despite the doctor's protests. "There's a convoy moving through Sector 7 and they don't know about the new IED patterns we identified." Dr. Martinez caught Marcus's eye and nodded toward the hallway. They stepped outside Emma's room to speak privately about her condition and prognosis. "The good news is that she's awake and her motor functions appear intact," Dr. Martinez explained quietly, "but she's experiencing significant disorientation and memory issues. She keeps thinking she's still deployed overseas, and she becomes extremely agitated when we try to orient her to reality." Marcus watched through the window as Emma continued to scan the room like she was looking for threats, her body language tense and ready for action. It was a posture he recognized from countless Marines he had treated in field hospitals, the hypervigilance that became second nature in combat zones. "What's the long-term prognosis?" Marcus asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Too early to tell," Dr. Martinez replied honestly. "Brain injuries are unpredictable. She could make a full recovery in weeks, or these cognitive issues could persist indefinitely. The psychological trauma is complicating things significantly. She's not just dealing with the injury from the accident. She's reliving combat experiences that happened years ago." Over the next several hours, Marcus found excuses to check on Emma's progress. Each time he visited, she seemed to be asking the same questions and expressing the same concerns about her military unit. The repetitive nature of her confusion was heartbreaking to witness. During one visit, Emma suddenly focused on Marcus with an intensity that caught him off guard. "You're military," she said with certainty, studying his face carefully. "Navy corpsman, based on how you move and assess the room. When did you serve?" Marcus was stunned that she had identified his background so accurately, despite her obvious cognitive impairment. "Iraq 2008 to 2010, he answered honestly. "How did you know?" "Your bearing, the way you position yourself near the door. How your eyes automatically scan for potential threats," Emma explained, her voice becoming clearer and more focused than he had heard since she woke up. "Plus, you have that look that all of us get after we've seen too much." For the first time since her accident, Emma seemed completely present and aware. The confusion and disorientation that had plagued her all day seemed to lift temporarily, replaced by the sharp intelligence that had made her successful in one of the military's most demanding specialties. "I keep having these dreams," she continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Or maybe they're memories. I can't tell the difference anymore. There's this roadside bomb and I'm trying to disarm it, but something goes wrong. People are counting on me and I fail them." Marcus felt his throat tighten with recognition. "Tell me about it," he said gently, pulling a chair closer to her bed. As Emma began to describe her recurring nightmares, Marcus realized they were remarkably similar to his own traumatic memories. The details were different. She dealt with explosives while he treated wounded soldiers, but the underlying themes were identical. The responsibility, the pressure, the devastating consequences of making mistakes in life or death situations. Talking with Emma felt like looking into a mirror that reflected his own struggles with combat trauma. But it also felt like an opportunity to help someone who understood his experiences in a way that civilians never could. For the first time in years, Marcus didn't feel completely alone with his demons. Their conversation was interrupted when Emma's confusion suddenly returned, and she began asking where she was and what had happened to her unit. The brief moment of clarity had passed, leaving Marcus to wonder if it would return again. 2 weeks into Emma's recovery, Marcus had established an unofficial routine of visiting her during his breaks and after his shifts ended. Her condition remained unpredictable. Some days she was lucid and engaged, while others found her lost in confusion and traumatic memories. But gradually she began to recognize him and remember their previous conversations. During one of her clearer moments, Emma asked him directly why he kept coming to see her. Marcus had been dreading this question because he wasn't entirely sure of the answer himself. How could he explain that seeing her struggle with trauma felt like confronting his own unresolved issues? How could he tell her that helping her somehow felt like a chance to redeem his failures from Iraq? "You remind me of someone I couldn't help," he finally admitted, staring out the window at the parking lot below. "A Marine Lance Corporal named Sarah Chen. She died in my arms during a mortar attack in Fallujah, and I've spent the last 8 years wondering if I could have done something different to save her." Emma listened intently, her expression growing more serious as Marcus continued his story. He told her about the guilt that had consumed him after losing Sarah, about the nightmares and anxiety attacks that had nearly ended his medical career, and about the long process of therapy and medication that had helped him function again. "I thought I had moved past it," Marcus concluded, "but when I saw your uniform that first night, everything came flooding back. I think helping you recover is my way of trying to make peace with what happened to Sarah." Emma was quiet for a long moment, processing what he had shared. When she finally spoke, her voice was gentle but firm. "You can't save me to make up for losing her, Marcus. That's not how healing works, and it's not fair to either of us." Her words stung because they contained an uncomfortable truth that Marcus had been avoiding. He realized that his involvement in Emma's care was motivated partly by selfish reasons, by his own need to feel useful and competent as a medic again. "But I do appreciate having someone here who understands," Emma continued. "The doctors and nurses are wonderful, but they've never experienced combat trauma. They treat the symptoms without really grasping the underlying wounds." Over the following days, their relationship began to shift from Marcus feeling responsible for Emma's recovery to them supporting each other as fellow veterans dealing with similar struggles. Emma shared stories about her time in Afghanistan, describing the incredible pressure of disarming improvised, explosive devices while knowing that one mistake could kill her entire team. "People think EOD specialists are fearless," she explained during one of their conversations. "But the truth is we're terrified every single time. The job requires you to function despite overwhelming fear, to make precise decisions when your hands are shaking and your heart is racing. After a while, that level of stress becomes your normal." Marcus understood completely. He had experienced the same paradox as a combat medic, being expected to remain calm and focused while treating horrific injuries under fire. The expectation that they could set aside their human emotions and function like machines had taken a toll on both of them. As Emma's physical recovery progressed, her psychological struggles became more apparent. She experienced severe anxiety attacks when unexpected noises reminded her of explosions. Crowds made her nervous because she couldn't assess all potential threats. Even simple decisions like choosing what to eat for lunch became overwhelming when her brain was already working overtime to process trauma. Marcus found himself sharing coping strategies that had helped him over the years. Deep breathing exercises for anxiety attacks, grounding techniques to stay present when flashbacks threatened to take over, the importance of maintaining routines and finding small, manageable goals to work toward each day. But Emma also taught Marcus things about resilience that he hadn't learned in his own recovery. Her determination to regain her independence was inspiring, even when progress felt impossibly slow. She refused to give up on herself, even during the darkest moments when her brain felt broken and her future seemed uncertain. One evening, as Marcus was preparing to leave after a particularly difficult day for Emma, she grabbed his hand and looked directly into his eyes. "Thank you for not treating me like I'm broken," she said quietly. "Everyone else looks at me with pity, like I'm a victim who needs to be protected. But you see me as a soldier who's fighting a different kind of battle." Walking to his car that night, Marcus realized that Emma was helping him heal just as much as he was helping her. Their friendship had become a source of strength for both of them, proving that sometimes the best medicine comes from connecting with someone who truly understands your struggles. 3 weeks after Emma's accident, Marcus received news that changed everything about her situation. Dr. Martinez called him aside during his shift to explain that Emma's medical leave from the Marines was ending, and her commanding officer was pressuring her to either return to duty or accept a medical discharge. "She's nowhere near ready for either option," Dr. Martinez said with obvious frustration. "Her cognitive function has improved significantly, but she still experiences memory gaps and severe anxiety episodes. The military's timeline doesn't match her recovery needs." Marcus felt a surge of anger on Emma's behalf. He had seen too many service members pushed out of the military before they were truly ready. left to navigate complex disability systems and civilian life without adequate support. The thought of Emma facing that struggle alone was unacceptable. When he shared this news with Emma, her reaction was more complex than he expected. Part of her wanted to fight for more time to recover, but another part felt like she was already becoming a burden on the system and her fellow Marines. "Maybe they're right," she said quietly, staring at her hands. "Maybe I should just accept the medical discharge and try to move on. I can't even remember what I had for breakfast this morning, so how can I expect to handle explosive devices again?" Marcus recognized the self-doubt and defeated attitude that had plagued his own recovery. "Your brain is still healing," he reminded her. 3 weeks ago, you couldn't remember your own name for more than 5 minutes. Look how far you've come since then." But Emma's confidence had been shaken by the pressure from her command and the reality of her ongoing limitations. She began withdrawing from their conversations, spending more time sleeping and less time engaging with her physical therapy and cognitive rehabilitation. The turning point came when Emma's chaplain from Camp Pendleton finally managed to visit. Chaplain Rodriguez was a soft-spoken man in his 50s, who had counseled hundreds of Marines through various crises. He spent several hours with Emma, and afterward her entire demeanor seemed different. "He reminded me that recovery isn't just about getting back to where I was before," Emma explained to Marcus later. "It's about figuring out who I am now and what I want my life to look like going forward. Maybe being an EOD specialist isn't my only identity." This perspective shift opened up new possibilities that neither Emma nor Marcus had considered. What if she didn't have to choose between returning to her old job or leaving the military entirely? What if there were other ways she could serve while accommodating her injury? Marcus began researching options for wounded veterans, reaching out to contacts from his own military service and veteran support organizations. He discovered programs that helped injured service members transition to new roles within the military, as well as extensive resources for those choosing to pursue civilian careers. Emma became increasingly interested in the possibility of working with other veterans struggling with trauma and brain injuries. Her experience as both a patient and a former combat specialist gave her unique insights that could help others navigate similar challenges. "I keep thinking about all the soldiers I served with who might be dealing with invisible wounds," she told Marcus during one of their evening conversations. "There's such a stigma around mental health and brain injuries in the military. Maybe I could help change that." Working together, they developed a plan for Emma's future that excited them both. She would accept a medical retirement from active duty, but remain connected to veteran support networks. She would pursue education in counseling or social work, specializing in military trauma and brain injury recovery. The plan wasn't perfect, and there were still many uncertainties about Emma's long-term prognosis. But for the first time since her accident, she had a sense of purpose and direction that went beyond simply surviving each day. Marcus found himself thinking about his own future as well. His work with Emma had reminded him why he became a medic in the first place, not just to treat physical injuries, but to help people through their darkest moments and guide them toward healing. He began exploring opportunities to work more directly with veteran populations, possibly returning to school himself to become a physician assistant or nurse practitioner, specializing in trauma care. Emma's courage in reimagining her life inspired him to consider making similar changes. As Emma's discharge from the hospital approached, both of them realized that their friendship had become something neither had expected. What started as Marcus's attempt to save someone he couldn't save before had evolved into a genuine partnership between two people committed to healing themselves and helping others do the same. The day before Emma's discharge from the hospital, Marcus received an unexpected visitor during his lunch break. A stern-looking Marine officer in dress blues was waiting for him in the hospital lobby, introducing himself as Major Stevens from Camp Pendleton. Emma's commanding officer had sent him to assess her condition and discuss her future with the Corps. Major Stevens was professional but direct in his questioning. He wanted to understand Marcus's medical opinion about Emma's readiness to return to duty, as well as his assessment of her psychological state. Marcus chose his words carefully, knowing that his answers could significantly impact Emma's military career. "Staff Sergeant Walsh has made remarkable progress," Marcus explained honestly, "but she's dealing with a complex combination of traumatic brain injury and combat-related PTSD. She needs continued support and rehabilitation, not the pressure of immediate return to high-stress duties. The major listened intently, taking notes and asking follow-up questions that revealed he had done his homework about Emma's service record. She had been an exemplary Marine before her accident, with commendations for bravery and technical expertise that made her valuable to the Corps. The Marine Corps has invested significant resources in training Staff Sergeant Walsh, Major Stevens pointed out. Her skills in explosive ordnance disposal are rare and desperately needed. We're reluctant to lose that investment unless absolutely necessary. Marcus understood the military's perspective, but he also knew Emma wasn't ready for the life-or-death responsibilities of EOD work. Her memory issues and anxiety attacks could be fatal in that environment, both for her and for the Marines who depended on her expertise. After the major left, Marcus went directly to Emma's room to prepare her for what would likely be a difficult conversation with her command. She was sitting by the window looking stronger and more alert than she had in weeks, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. "I know why he's here," Emma said before Marcus could speak. "My first sergeant called this morning to let me know they're considering my options. Part of me wants to fight to stay in, but another part knows I'm not the same Marine I was before the accident." They spent the afternoon talking through Emma's feelings about leaving the military, a process that was more complex than Marcus had anticipated. The Marine Corps hadn't just been Emma's job. It had been her identity, her family, and her purpose for the past 8 years. Giving up that identity felt like losing herself entirely. "I joined when I was 18, Emma explained, her voice thick with emotion. "I've never been a civilian adult. I don't know how to be anything other than a Marine." Marcus shared his own struggles with transitioning to civilian life, describing the loneliness and sense of purposelessness that had plagued him for months after leaving active duty. But he also emphasized how much growth and fulfillment he had found in his civilian career, particularly in helping other veterans navigate similar transitions. The next morning, Major Stevens returned for his meeting with Emma. Marcus waited in the hallway, close enough to provide support if needed but respecting their privacy. The conversation lasted nearly 2 hours, and when the major finally emerged, his expression was unreadable. Emma appeared in her doorway a few minutes later, looking emotionally drained but somehow relieved. She had accepted a medical retirement with full benefits and an honorable discharge. The decision had been difficult, but she felt confident it was the right choice for her future. "He actually listened to me," Emma said with surprise. "I expected him to pressure me to return to duty, but he seemed genuinely concerned about my well-being. The Corps is going to help me transition to veteran services and education benefits." As they prepared for Emma's discharge from the hospital, Marcus realized how much both of their lives had changed over the past month. Emma had gone from being a broken, confused patient to becoming a determined young woman with concrete plans for her future. Marcus had rediscovered his passion for helping others heal from trauma. The discharge process was bittersweet. Emma was excited to begin the next chapter of her life, but both she and Marcus knew they would miss their daily conversations and mutual support. They had become each other's anchors during a turbulent time, and maintaining that connection would require intentional effort. Emma would be staying temporarily in transitional housing for veterans while she applied to colleges and began the process of adjusting to civilian life. Marcus had already connected her with veteran support groups and mental health resources in the area, ensuring she wouldn't face the transition alone. As Marcus helped Emma gather her belongings and prepare to leave the hospital, he felt a profound sense of completion that had nothing to do with romantic feelings or dramatic rescues. They had simply been two people helping each other heal, and in the process, they had both discovered strength they didn't know they possessed. The friendship they had built would continue beyond the hospital walls, but it would evolve as they both worked toward their individual goals and recovery. 6 months after Emma's discharge from the hospital, Marcus received a text message that made him smile during what had been a particularly challenging shift in the emergency department. Emma had just finished her first semester at the local community college, where she was studying psychology with a focus on trauma counseling. Her grades were excellent, and more importantly, she was thriving in her new environment. Their friendship had evolved exactly as Marcus had hoped it would. They met for coffee every few weeks to catch up on their progress and support each other through ongoing challenges. Emma still experienced occasional memory issues and anxiety episodes, but she had developed effective coping strategies and was working with a therapist who specialized in military trauma. Marcus had also made significant changes in his own life. Inspired by his work with Emma, he had enrolled in a physician assistant program with the goal of specializing in emergency medicine for veteran populations. The coursework was demanding, especially while working full-time at the hospital, but he felt more motivated and purposeful than he had in years. The most significant development was that Emma had begun volunteering at a veteran support center downtown, where she facilitated support groups for other veterans. Dealing with brain injuries and PTSD, her combination of lived experience and growing knowledge of trauma psychology made her incredibly effective at connecting with people who were struggling. It's amazing how much it helps to talk with someone who actually understands what you're going through, she told Marcus during one of their coffee meetings. These veterans open up to me in ways they never would with civilian counselors, simply because I've been where they are. Marcus had attended one of Emma's support group sessions and been impressed by her natural ability to create a safe space for difficult conversations. She had found her calling in helping others navigate the same challenges she was still working through herself. The success of Emma's support groups had caught the attention of the hospital administration, and they had approached Marcus about developing a formal program for treating veteran patients. His reputation for connecting with military patients had grown considerably since Emma's case, and several other veterans had specifically requested to work with him. Together, Marcus and Emma began developing a comprehensive program that would address both the medical and psychological needs of veteran patients. The hospital was enthusiastic about the proposal, especially given the large veteran population in their area and the lack of specialized services available. On a quiet Sunday afternoon in early spring, Marcus and Emma drove to a military cemetery about an hour from the hospital. Marcus had finally decided it was time to visit Sarah Chen's grave, something he had been avoiding for 8 years. Emma had offered to accompany him, understanding that this was an important step in his healing process. Standing before Sarah's headstone, Marcus felt a complex mixture of emotions: grief for the young Marine he couldn't save, gratitude for the path that loss had ultimately led him down, and peace with the knowledge that he had honored her memory by dedicating his life to helping others. "I think she would be proud of what you've accomplished," Emma said quietly, placing a small bouquet of flowers at the base of the headstone. "And I think she would approve of the lives you've touched because of what you learned from losing her." As they walked back to the car, Marcus reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought them to this point. Emma's accident had forced him to confront his unresolved trauma, but their friendship had ultimately helped them both heal in ways neither could have achieved alone. The program they were developing would help countless other veterans find the support and understanding they needed to rebuild their lives after service. It felt like the perfect synthesis of their individual experiences and skills, creating something meaningful from the pain they had both endured. A year later, the Veterans Recovery Program at Memorial Hospital had become a model for other medical centers across the region. Emma had completed her associate degree and transferred to a 4-year university to continue her psychology studies. Marcus had graduated from his physician assistant program and was now working full-time with veteran patients. Their friendship remained strong, built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared commitment to helping others heal from trauma. They had both learned that recovery wasn't about returning to who they were before their injuries. It was about accepting their experiences and using them to become who they were meant to be. The emblem that had initially triggered Marcus's trauma response had ultimately led him to his life's work and to a friendship that enriched both their lives immeasurably. Sometimes the most difficult challenges become the gateway to the most meaningful opportunities for growth and service.